on antler shedding in the second rut. So Tyler, take it away, my friend.
Well, just kind of piggyback off of what I do. I'm a land management specialist. Like Justin said, I go around and help landowners here, mostly here in Pennsylvania. I've traveled out of the state a few times now. Consulting and stuff, and I just consulted for a guy on 6 acres. So it doesn't matter how big of a property that you have. You can always do something to better it. So, anyways, that's beside the point. But like I said, my name is Tyler Heeter from Central Pennsylvania. I own my own wildlife and forestry consulting business. It's Jackson Mountain Wildlife Solutions LLC. And like I said, I pretty much go around and help guys achieve their habitat goals for their property and stuff. And I won't go into that anymore here, but and we're gonna kind of go into like the biology of white-tailed deer, because that really corresponds with the habitat. Anything land management is gonna go hand in hand with biology along the way. So, um, the biggest thing I really want to hit on right now, and it's one of the biggest topics right now because of our weather and stuff that we've been having, and the bitter temperatures, the stress levels, all that, blah blah blah. Here in the Northeast, at least, I mean, this can happen anywhere in the United States where there's white-tailed deer, obviously. But the the biggest topic of tonight that I want to cover is, why do bucks shed antlers early? And when I'm saying early, like, I really have seen it so much over social media during our gun season here in Pennsylvania. And if a buck is dropping that early during our gun season, which is, it's right after Thanksgiving and it runs for 2 weeks, that's extremely early to be dropping antlers for a buck. That means those buck are super stressed out. Um, Typically, a buck that's healthy will hold antlers all the way into March, April timeframe. Um, that usually March. March is a good time. So if you have a lot of buck or on your trail cameras, you're seeing them in the fields or you're seeing them in the woods while you're scouting for next year or whatever, they still have their antlers later on into late winter, early spring. That's a good sign that that buck is a healthy deer. So, what are the factors that cause buck to drop their antlers early? And the number one thing, I'm a member of the National Deer Association. There's lots of information out there, and a lot of that information I've learned from a lot of, wildlife professionals, being a member, um, and guys that, have went to school for this type of stuff, secondary education, whatnot, just studying this stuff. Number one reason why a lot of buck will drop their antlers super early is because food sources are limited. Um, and I'm going to kind of piggyback off on that. I got a shed here that I'm going to explain a little bit of things about here too. Um, Food sources are the biggest thing, and when they're limited, the stress levels of a white-tailed deer go out the roof. He's more concerned about saving those fat reserves and stuff for him, through the skeletal system, the circulatory system, and all that. So that sends signals to antlers to drop. He's stressed out that much. He's dropping his antlers because of the limited amount of foods that's available in the environment. So, anyways, like here in Central PA, we got hit by what's called gypsy moth, and the state wants to call it spongy moth and all that stuff because of political things and all that. I call it gypsy moth, and that's what it'll always be called. Um, and what the gypsy moth tend to do, they target our oaks. So white oak, they target the most. So when they eat the leaves off our white oaks, it stresses the white oaks out, and then they don't produce acorns. Well, they also affect red oak and chestnut oak too, as well. Scarlet oak, pin oak, they hit them all. They tend to hit the white oak species more than the red oak species. But on our 500 acres here in central Pennsylvania, where my family hunts, we did not have a single white oak acorn this year, not a one. And that put a big hurting on the amount of deer that we saw this year. The deer that we normally had were on the neighbors this year because, and it's kind of funny because I do work for my neighbor. I do a lot of habitat work for him and stuff too, which we still do stuff on our property as well. Um, but he's a little bit more well off with money, and he was able to um, spray his property for gypsy moth this year. I think it's anywhere from like 50 to like $100 per acre that it takes to spray. He got his whole, I believe his whole 200 acres sprayed. So you guys can understand adding that up. That's a lot of money. Um, so he was able to do that, and he was able to kill off the gypsy moth and allow the oak species over there to produce acorns. And I really feel that's the reason why a lot of the deer that we normally had went over there. So, anyways, to kind of kick off of that, the guys that are hunting public land up north, you don't have food plots, you don't have ag land, whatever it may be. If they didn't spray the state, that put a huge hurt on the whitetail deer's food source. And that's just another stress level, another factor for the reason why that a lot of guys are seeing deer or seeing a lot of buck without antlers, or shooting what they thought was a doe during gun season, walk up to it and find out that it's a buck that shed his antlers during our gun season. Like I said, which is extremely early because it's at the end of November, beginning of December. If you're seeing buck really dropping that early, that's a huge sign that you might want to start working on your habitat and providing more food. Um, Obviously, ag land's another thing too. Maybe there was a drought. Maybe there was a real heavy year with a lot of rain, and the guys couldn't get in to get their crops in the ground. And maybe sometimes those deer rely on that food source too because your habitat's not good. So that's another stress factor involving food. Um, Food plots too. Like I can say that for another thing too. For uh, we already have a buck that shed his antlers. It was probably about the beginning of January here. I checked trail cameras, and we don't normally have buck that drop their antlers even that early. A lot of times, our food plots we didn't have the food this year like we normally have. So those bucks are really stressing out, and I predict I would say in the next 2 to 3 weeks, there's probably going to be some more buck on camera that have their antlers shed already and cast already. Um, and obviously, just having no browse, a lot of the big northern woods and a lot of state forests and public land is not being managed for the timber. And like I said, the state doesn't really go on and do a lot of food plots. They don't do a lot of any other things to help supplement a whitetail deer for food wise. The only thing they can really do is get a timber harvest, and a lot of places on these big public lands are not being timbered enough, and they're not growing enough groceries on the understory, and that's just another stress factor and another reason why bucks will shed their antlers. If food is one of the biggest things why a buck will shed his antlers early. Um, Obviously, just regular stress. We have stress every day. That's kind of the next thing I have here on my list here. Just having just general stress. There could be it could be a weather change like here and right now. We just had a nice warm up here today. It was close 50 degrees today, so that's definitely going to help relieve some of the stress because we just had about 2 or 3 weeks of single digits during the day and negatives during the night, with anywhere, I believe we probably had about 6 8 inches of snow. So now that's not a lot of snow, but it's a lot of good bitter cold temperatures. And if you're not taking care of your deer, or things fail via food plots or whatever it may be, or your hard mass isn't there, those deer are really stressing out, which is another reason why bucks lose their antlers early too. Another stress level is hunters. Every year, I believe too that truly has an effect on the overall health of a white-tailed deer. I'm not against driving deer by any means, and a lot of guys like to drive. It's traditional type of hunting here, and at least in Central PA. I know it is in some other states too as well. But constantly, repeatedly driving an area every year like state ground. I know we have a lot of gangs that come in on the backside of our property, which is state forest, and they push the living heck out of it. And the more stress or more repeated stress of that constantly, driving deer and causing stress that way, that's going to be another reason why buck drop their antlers early too, is due to hunter pressure. And then obviously, I wouldn't say so much here necessarily, even in the coyotes, there's more coyotes around than there has been, but predators. Now we have bear, we have bobcat, we have coyote. Probably not the bear doing so much of stressing out the buck now, but groups of coyotes picking away at a buck. They might not kill them, but they're running them down. They're stressing them out. So predators are another big thing why a buck could be dropping his antlers too. Also injuries. Maybe a buck was hit by a car. You know, when they're hit, and their body has to recover in a certain manner to help achieve their overall health being resupplied to a certain area of the deer. Maybe he was hit in the front shoulder or the back leg or something like that, and it's broke now or whatever. Well, he's going to focus his overall health on recouping from that. So he's going to cast his antlers early due to that too. I've seen that. I have actually seen that happen before, where we've had a buck hit already on trail camera. He had a gimpy leg, and he lost his antlers early the one year. I do remember that. So vehicle collisions with buck, obviously other buck, fighting during the rut. I mean, some of those bucks could have been gored. They could have been punched up pretty good, beat around, that sort of thing. So buck to buck confrontation, that's another thing that can cause bucks to shed their antlers early too, as well. And obviously, I'm going to add hunters here again. Shooting deer with a bow or with a handgun, with a muzzleloader, with a rifle, whatever it may be, and wounding a deer. That's just going to, like I said, it all comes down to stress. If we really just want to label it as one thing, it's stress that causes early casting of antlers. Testosterone too. And I'm going to kind of talk about that a little bit more in the second rut, but testosterone levels play a certain role too. Obviously, and well, day length too as well, but it's mostly testosterone. Um, if you have more doe, which that's going to kind of lead into the second rut thing a little bit, so I'm kind of jumping into that just a tiny little bit. The more doe that you have in the population, and the time that you didn't take to shoot the adequate amount of does, let's just say there's 20 extra doe that didn't get bred or something like that. His testosterone levels are going to be higher, which is going to, it's a special thing in a whitetail deer. The higher the testosterone, the more and longer they're going to hold on to their antlers. When injury or stress, food related, whatever injury, stress levels, whatever, that's going to drop the testosterone levels. So maybe there isn't a lot of doe, and he'll cast his antlers early too, because everybody's bred, his testosterone levels drop, and that will also cause early casting of antlers as well. And then I'm going to kind of wrap this up for another reason why buck will lose their antlers early is obviously being sick. EHD, I'm just going to list off a few things. These aren't really going to be causing deer to shed their antlers, obviously now, but there's EHD, there's CWD. Deer can supposedly get some form of coronavirus now or whatever it is now. I don't really totally believe that, but there's many other transmittable sicknesses. They can get some forms of pneumonia and all that, blah, blah, blah. It could be just sickness. And just to really just sum this up, it's all about stress. So it's no different than you guys. If you have if you tend to manage your stress, you're eating well, you have everything available to you, your stress levels are going to be down. Let's say the bills are paid, you got food on the table, life's good, you're taking your vitamins, you keep your stress levels down, you're not going to get sick near as much, or if not any. So it's no different than a white-tailed deer. Providing food sources, they have the minerals and all that. You adequately harvest does and maintain your doe to buck ratio as best you can. You work on your habitat. You try to make it as minimal as possible, the stress levels to a white-tailed deer. And essentially, to wrap that all up, that's essentially why bucks will shed their antlers super early. So here, guys, I have a shed antler. I don't know if you can see it. It's not a real big one. I found it in 2019. I write all the dates on all the sheds that I find. Right here, it's kind of not, it's kind of off topic a little bit, but can you guys see the base of the pedicle there? See, normally right here at my finger, right there level with my finger is where normally it should be right level with the right level with the pedicle right there with the where the spur comes out around here. Look at all this extra bone here. That's not necessarily a good thing. A deer can still live from it, but if you have a lot of bone where it still has parts of the skull plate left on top, that's not necessarily a good thing either. And that's another reason why that deer could have been injured from the rut. He could have had another collision with another buck and caused the skull plate to break, and that can fall off and cause brain hemorrhaging or a brain abscess. So that's another reason that, you know, a lot could be a reason why some of the buck lost their antlers early too. And that's not a good thing either. That's going to cause bacteria and different things and other things in the environment to get into that cut and that wound into the brain and kill the deer as well. So if you ever see that finding shed antlers and it's got a lot of skull cap left on it right here, this one's not too bad. And I'd say that deer, well, like I said, it was 2019. This deer's probably dead now already, but especially here in PA. But yeah, that's another reason why deer can die, you know, from early shed antlers too, as well, because of that. So, anyways, I'm gonna kind of work into my second topic of the night, and we'll go back through. If anybody has any questions about anything, we'll have questions for, you know, the antler casting early. But this one here, it's kind of another big thing too. It gets tossed around the outdoor industry quite a bit. Is there a second rut? Question mark. Is there a second rut? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Question mark. Yes and no. So why? Those are kind of the things I have written down for you guys to kind of start jogging your minds. Like, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Yes and no. It's actually a kind of mixture of both. Uh, so let's back this up here a little bit. So if you're seeing a lot of fawns on your property, let's say you're managing your property very well, you got quite a bit of food plot acreage, you're doing timber stand improvement, you're planting fruit trees, you're designating sanctuaries for these deer to live in, you're trapping predators, you're shooting the adequate amount of doe, you're doing everything right. You're doing everything humanly possible that's right for the white-tailed deer on your property. Okay. So, biologically speaking, a fawn born, let's say here in 2025, we come up here in the spring. The fawns that are born here in the spring of this year, going into the fall, late winter, if they reach a weight of 65 to 70 pounds, those fawns, which is 6.5 months old at that point, if they reach those in that range of weight, they become sexually mature in the white-tailed deer herd. So a lot of times is, especially during the late season, like the late gun season, you know, you're hunting over a food source. Maybe it's corn or soybeans. Maybe it's a brassica plot of turnips and radishes or cereal grains. Or maybe you're hunting the big woods and you're hunting public land way back in. They just did a timber harvest recently. And now they got all that fresh browse on the ground, lots of cover, lots of food. So if the habitat's maintained that way, a lot of times you're going to see fawns feeding in those areas because a lot of times the mature doe have been pushed off or they've been shot already during archery season or the gun season. So if you see a group of fawns that are consistently coming into a certain feeding area, a lot of times is if you have a camera there or if you're just hunting it out of a stand and viewing that, a lot of times you'll have buck come in and check those fawns out. And you often, and this is something I did years ago because I didn't know any better at the time. I'm scratching my head. I'm like, why are the buck bumping fawns? That doesn't even make any sense. Well, as the years went on, I started learning about white-tailed deer and the biology of it. When went to school for it. Now I do it land management wise now to provide more food so that more of these deer reach a sexual maturity, so that landowners want to see more deer. So they're going to be pumping out more fawns for the next year, and it's kind of symbolizing that your habitat's firing on all cylinders. You're doing the right thing. You're providing a lot of food for white-tailed deer. So on average, a white-tailed deer eats 2,000 pounds of browse a year. So your woods, your food plots, your fruit trees have to be firing on all cylinders to provide that much food that the fawn crop of this spring going into winter is going to be that healthy that buck are actually going to tend those fawns and breed them. So if you're looking to bump up a deer herd and build up your population, that's exactly what you want to do, because those fawns are going to be bred and they're going to rear more fawns into the population. So if you're looking to build a deer herd, you got to work on your habitat. Biggest thing is you got to work on your habitat. Um, and then I have another, like I said, I have another bulleted point here. So good habitat, I have good habitat written down equals food, which equals second rut. So it's all based about how you do things land management wise on your property. The more food, the more cover, the more water, and the more breeding opportunities that you can supply your white-tailed deer, you probably are going to get a trickle down effect of a second rut. So now we're kind of going to um, another reason why the second rut happens as well. Um, let's say your buck to doe ratio is really out of whack. Let's say you got 10 doe to 1 buck in your area, which I know for us here in Central PA, I mean, I actually did some calculations this year from the stand, and I think I was roughly like 5 to 6 doe per buck this year, just from viewing things and marking down how many buck and how many doe I saw through the season. So I mean, just like I said, just for quick math, it ended up being like five or six buck per doe, or sorry, 5 to 6 doe per buck that it would have equated to. So I realized that our buck to doe ratio is out of whack. So let's just say it's November. A lot of like late October through the month of November, a lot of buck are breeding doe at that point. Now
Hey,
I'm just
Tyler,
yes.
I hate to interrupt you. Can you go back just a second and say what the healthy ratio was?
What a healthy ratio should be.
Yeah.
Technically, by National Deer Association, numbers and facts, and state agencies, two doe to a buck is the really the healthiest ratio that you should have. But you know you can't control all factors, so it's almost virtually impossible to get to that. You can try to get to that by harvesting more does on your property, and maybe you do get close, but I'd say 3 to 1, that's still doing pretty well. Then at that point you're getting fairly close. I don't think you're ever going to get it perfect, but so to kind of piggyback off of that again here a little bit, kind of a reason why there's a second rut a lot of times too is, and I truly believe this, if your buck to doe ratio is really out of whack and you got a lot of mature doe, if a doe is not bred in her 28-day cycle of being in heat, if she doesn't get bred, let's say it's the end of November and she doesn't get bred, well, it's not going to be for another 28 days till she comes into heat again. So we line that up. That's at the end of December, beginning of January then at that point. So if your does aren't getting bred, they come into heat every 28 days. So a lot of times you'll see an adult doe get pushed by buck in January yet. Well, she hasn't been bred yet. So then you know, oh, this might be also be a bad thing too, because we're having a lot of adult doe now that aren't being bred because our buck to doe ratio is out of whack. See, it kind of has a 50-50 split of being good and being bad all at the same time. So, so an adult doe is not going to come into heat. It's going to come into heat every 28 days, essentially. So if she's not bred in that time frame of a couple days, she's going to recycle back into heat 28 days later. So it's almost another month till that doe is being bred. So the more and more doe that you have in the population, and the bucks aren't getting to them and breeding them because your buck population's super low, those bucks are going to stress out even more to try to breed more doe later on in the winter. you know, it, and that could be, that could be another thing too why bucks are losing their antlers early too, because they're just, it all comes down to stress. See, that's why both of these go hand in hand so well. And like I said, just to kind of wrap this whole thing up again, you're either with the second rut, you either have too many adult doe that haven't been bred, or your habitat is that well off that if you shot the adequate amount of does and they had a good fawn crop, and you're seeing those bucks bump and breed those doe fawns because they become sexually mature because your habitat's good enough to support enough food in the ecosystem for them to get to that certain weight to become sexually mature, you're doing something very good for your deer herd that way too. So all in all, that's pretty much what I had there in a nutshell. For going over buck casting their antlers and the reasons why the second rut is good and bad. So if anybody has any questions, we can roll into that and discuss it, and I will give my best educated answer to anybody that has a question.
No questions, anybody? I mean, that's good. That means you covered it, Tyler.
I mean, I tried.
If y'all think of any questions, just throw them in here. That definitely explains why one of our properties has so many antlered bucks right now, is because we haven't been on it since November. So
Yeah, if you're minimizing that stress, it all comes down to stress. If we can sum this whole thing up, it's stress, basically in a nutshell.
definitely makes sense. Does anybody that's on this call know there's a few people that have their own private properties? Do y'all have any of these issues? Bucks dropping too early? I used to think it was just a northern thing, but I know people in Michigan that have antlers on their deer right now. You know, so it's definitely not. I used to always joke and say, "Well, the South, we keep our deer antlers till March, April," but in reality, there's places here with them dropping. So
Absolutely. There's all those different factors that can play into why bucks lose their antlers super early.
yep.
Yeah, I
And
think.
Alabama's on, like, I know Alabama in the South is on like fire right now.
Like I said, like this year was the worst on social media for guys posting, they just shot a deer. They thought it was a doe during the gun season here in northern PA, and he already shed his antlers. Like that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in eastern Iowa, and I got the majority of them are still holding here. I got some private property and some publics that I look at. So I normally don't find antlers around here till end of February. I really don't start looking till the end of February until March.
hmm
So I got cameras out, and most of them are still holding here.
And do you say you're from Iowa?
Yeah, eastern Iowa.
Eastern Iowa. Well, you're definitely in a. I think Iowa's the best state in the nation for whitetail deer hunting, in my opinion. They got plenty of good ag land and good dirt out there to grow good crops, and that's why there's big deer out there. So
Yep, yep. Unfortunately, I don't have the private all to myself. I get to share with a few others, and they don't actually approach it the same way I do, so it makes it a little bit difficult, but
mm,
still do pretty well.
I totally understand.
How did you? So I try to keep track of how many doe I'm seeing, how many bucks I'm seeing. I just can't differentiate between each group of does. I don't know if I'm counting the same does over and over again. How were you able to do that? You feel like you were pretty accurate?
Um, I was just getting like a general census. I
Yeah.
was pretty much counting every single deer I saw. Maybe you know there could have been times where obviously it could have been the same group of doe, just moving out throughout differently through the property. But,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know, by running trail cameras a lot of times too, um, especially over, food plots, my family has 500 acres and here in central PA and we plant food plots and whatnot. And a lot of times those doe, when they're on a food source like that, they're repetitive coming there all the time. So once you start looking at trail camera pictures and understanding, okay, this is a group of 4 big adult doe and maybe they got like 3 or 4 fawns with them. And then you kind of look at markers on them and stuff, and then you check a camera on another place on another piece of the end of the property in a different direction. It might be 5 or 6 fawns and 2 adult doe. So you kind of understand your doe groups, throughout the whole course of the property and season. And then eventually too, I'll realize, okay, that's that same group. So then maybe you don't necessarily count them, because
Right.
you're constantly seeing them all the time. So they're there. So you're counting the different doe groups that you're seeing elsewhere.
Yep. I kind of got a feel for that this year. I used to keep track through the season, but I didn't run cameras, and this year I'd had a lot of cameras out. So I feel that my buck to doe ratio is actually, I think, looking pretty good. Because it
That's
seems like I actually was scared to shoot does this year. It didn't seem like there were that many around. So
right. And you're going to have times where that's going to happen where, maybe your doe harvest was aggressive for a few years. It's okay to lay off doe
yep.
harvest for a year or two, and just understand that what's going on in your habitat, how the browse is, are they really eating food plots down? Are they hammering the crops? At that point, you got to realize, hey, we got to shoot some doe, and it's going to make room for more buck. It's going to lower the stress levels and all that stuff.
Yep.
It's no different than people. I don't want to be jammed in with 100 people in a room where I'm, back to back, shoulder to shoulder with everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that all makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Don't be shy, guys. You can ask questions.
Hey, Tyler, what are your thoughts on like age-based management on public lands? Is it worth it to even try to shoot mature deer at that point?
Oh, you know what? That's a super tough question. You know what? It's all about your goals and objectives for you on your own. Maybe you're like, okay, if I see that first 2.5-year-old, I'm smoking them. If that's what the public land is producing, I can't tell you to let that deer go walk past you. I'm privileged enough with my family's property. I usually leave 3.5-year-old deer walk right past me that, easily are in the 120s to 130 range. And I'm letting them walk past me here in central PA, which is uh, that's a super tough thing for a lot of guys to do, especially in PA, because PA is #1 in the nation for hunters per square mile. So
Yeah.
if you're growing deer to 4.5 years old in PA, you're doing something right. But to kind of sum up your thing on public land, I think in certain portions of the country, it might be worth to let some 2-year-olds walk past you. I know, like for instance, Iowa public land, you could still go out there and shoot a 5, 6, 7-year-old buck on public land out there, but it's honestly based upon how the state is managing their wildlife though too. and how hunters respect wildlife. You know, there's states where guys, you know, this is a trophy state. I'm looking for a trophy whitetail, and a lot of guys are passing up young and buck on public land. But then you get to like the Northeast here where I'm at, like New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, you know, even portions of northern Ohio or whatever, you know, here in the Northeast, like New Hampshire, all that stuff. They see something that's legal and it's got 3 points on one side. Most guys are shooting it, even if it's a year and a half old deer. So honestly, if you want to pass on younger deer and look for a bigger deer on public land, there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I would encourage that, but it's not always it to me, like I said, it's in the eye of the beholder at that point. You
Right.
gotta, you know, if you're tickled pink with a 15-inch wide basic 8-point that's got 5 or 6-inch tines, then good for you, man. You harvested a really nice deer on public land. Kudos to you. That's awesome. You know, if that's what you want to do, I'm going to congratulate you. It's it's the matter of the guys that, you know, that aren't respecting wildlife, and they're constantly plugging away on these younger deer, and then they kind of shove that into the guy's face that manages property, and they say, well, I guess you guys wouldn't shoot that. Well, if you're asking for my opinion, no, I wouldn't, because I want to grow a deer herd and I want to shoot better quality whitetails. And if that means it's a bigger buck that's 4.5 years old, then that's my goal. It might not be your goal, but it's my goal. And hey man, everybody, we're all on the same page here. We're all hunters. You know, that's my advice.
Yeah. Well, we're down here in Texas, and Texas has got such a huge variety of environments.
Hmm.
Like if you go over where Nick's at, there's piney woods and swamps out there. And you come over where I'm at, and then you got scrubs and cedars and some oaks, and then you go out to West Texas, and you're all in the mesquites and cactus,
Hmm.
and there's mountains in between. So
Hmm.
there's no uh, I guess there's no one way to hunt Texas public lands because they're all different from one region to the next.
Right. And, you know, kind of, you know, hit on that a little bit. All the environments are going to be different. So sustainability wise and a trophy quality wise for whitetail deer, some of those environments are going to produce way more food and cover compared to some of the other ones. So as you understand that and kind of move around a little bit and hunt those public lands, which I don't think Texas has a whole lot of public land, most of it's private. Like it's
Yeah.
like not 95% private, whatever it is.
Yeah,
So
something like that.
right. So most of the lands there in Texas are mostly private lands. So finding a little chunk of public land, you know, in Texas, it's probably pretty hard. I'm sure it is. But yeah, so I mean, you just got to kind of learn those public lands. You got to kind of understand the environment of, you know, that it's got to cover food, water, cover, and breeding opportunities for whitetail deer. And once you find that sweet spot and you know it's producing better quality deer, then maybe you hone on that. And you might shoot, I don't know, you might shoot 130, 140-inch deer on public land. You know, and it could be a, you know, a 4.5, 5.5-year-old deer. You don't, they're always out there, guys. There's always big buck being shot on public land every single year. I mean, here in PA, I think the biggest one that I saw this year was probably like in the 180-inch mark, shot on public land, way back in. It's like, I just don't understand sometimes how those deer even survive that long, especially in public land here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I'm actually a huge, I say it all the time to people, records are killed almost every single day. Like there is not bigger deer being killed in the early 1900s as there was right now. I've seen, let's just say, I won't say too much because I can't say names and stuff, but I have literally been to 3 or 4 different people's houses who are not on social media, who do not do the look at my deer and stuff, and they have potential records, state, if not, you know, world records in their homes, and they could care less about someone knowing. 5 people know. I've actually seen podcasts and videos of others just like me that have seen this, and we're talking back mountains, you know, I know this one guy is literally in a town. I don't even know if it's a town, you know, it's 30 minutes on the West Virginia border. Like, it's just, there's places that people take big deer, and I always get in my head, like, yeah, you should do management practices, but like, no one should ever put in their head, oh, I'll never get one, or it won't happen because I hunt this piece of public. I hunted a piece of public this year in Virginia, and it's not too far from some land we have, which is very well managed. We let big bucks walk that I would never even dream of letting walk in my state, or really, gosh, the next 5 states up, to be honest with you, 3 or 4 states up. And had a buck come I seen on public land, and was like, the next day I was like, I'm going to hunt this other area that's on our place. That buck actually went through 2 properties and came over to where I was at. It was really just the doe he was with. I got really lucky that she was in heat and he was just stuck on her, but came over 2 properties. And the only reason I know that is because everyone had cell camera photos from the day before when we were all talking. I shot that buck, super excited. The next day, the neighbor up on the hill, there's a piece of public behind his place. He had a double drop time buck standing at his barn, maybe 500 yards from public land. And he called us, and we're like, are you messing with us? Like, do you even know what a double drop time buck looks like? And we're goofing off with him. And he's like, no. He's like, I'm looking right at it. They're black. You can tell he ain't got to rub them. He's like, I'm looking at him right now. And he's not a real big hunter. So he was telling us about it. I'm like, man, like, that is so crazy. And we talked to the people around there. No one's seen that deer, and everyone talks. We're all really cordial with each other. We try to, you know, okay, you're going to shoot this buck. We'll try not to do it, but you know, if my kid's out there, he might, you know, so we try to be like that, and no one's seen this buck. So, I'm always optimistic when I hunt. I think you never know what's going to happen. And we live in a great time where, and I just look at like how history is. There's way more management practices now on everything, bass fishing. I mean, everything. You know, you say you eat a bass nowadays, people laugh. Back in the day, you said you put a bass back, they laughed. So times change. So I think we have way more management practices. I think deer are only going to continue to get bigger, but you know, like Tyler said, always take what you want to take, you know, whatever. But if you do want to get big ones, obviously once you watch a mature buck do his thing, that's where that like addiction comes in, because he acts a lot different than your scrubs and all that other stuff. I get tickled pink on whatever, but they do act different. And when you get to see it and you can wait and you don't kill them yet and you watch them for a second, I feel like you almost like learn like years of hunting, like packed into like one experience. So if you can hold out, you definitely learn a lot. But I'm an emotional hunter, so I'm going with how I feel that day. So
And there's nothing wrong with that.
hopefully,
shoot a spike.
anyway.
I'll shoot a spike all day if he's over 2 years old. I don't care, you know. But if, you know, aging something on the hoof is difficult if you're a novice. Like, I've only really seriously been hunting for about 5 years. And so there's a lot of things that I have yet to learn. But I know that out on this property, this public land piece in West Texas, out in San Angelo, there's 120 class deer out there that we have pictures of all year long.
They're there.
I mean, really the only way to, what I used to do is I would set a limit to myself. It wasn't age, it was inches then. Now it's age. And if you do that, if that's what you want to do, you'll find yourself learning more and more every year, watching bigger deer every year. And eventually you'll just start meeting your goals every year. Maybe not every year, might take you a while, but I also agree that, mature deer big deer are just different. I had the opportunity here since 2020 to watch a deer. And when I saw him in 2020, he was probably 3.5 years old, and he was just spooky. He was keyed in on everything around him. It was weird for a 3.5-year-old to look that way. And now this year, he's an absolute giant. He's pushing 190. He's probably 7.5 to 8.5 years old, and he is just a ghost. It's amazing what they can do and how they can survive once they get that age.
I
So-
totally agree with you, man. Like here in Central PA, we strive, or on our property, we strive for 4.5 and older. We strive to do that as much as possible, and that's a pretty hard feat to do here in Central PA with all the hunters. Like our neighbors to the west of us, they shot 20 deer this year.
Jeez.
I mean, we shot 1 buck, 5 doe, and I know the gangs that hunt behind us on the state forest shot 11 doe and 2 or 3 bucks. So our deer population took a beating
Yeah, no telling.
around us this year. So honestly, if we didn't pass up on a lot of those younger buck that are like, around like the 100 to 115 inch mark, we wouldn't have the 125 to 140 low 140s buck to hunt the following year, and that's a big deer for us here in Central PA. So it is.
Yeah, it takes some restraint to start passing up
does.
deer and setting your goals, but it's achievable, I think, even on public ground.
Absolutely, it is. If that's your goal, yes, it is. And like, aging deer. You know what? That might be my next topic to talk about. Maybe we'll do that. If you guys want to do that, I'll talk about aging deer the next time. How about that?
I'm all for that because I'm just learning that myself. I didn't really pay
Oh.
much attention in years past, so
So I'm not saying I'm the total best at it, but my family's been doing it for a long time. My father-in-law, my wife, we've all been doing it for a very long time now. And, I'm 32 now, so I've been hunting since I was 12, so 20 years. I really wasn't getting serious, till, like my early 20s, when I really started realizing, okay, we have a lot of nice young buck that have a good set of antlers. If I can get them to 3.5 and 4.5 years old, we're going to have some slammers running around. And like I said, that's speaking a lot for here in PA because, there's a lot of guys that are brown as down attitude, and that's not a good thing though either. And we can talk about that a whole other time, but yeah, I'd be very interested on talking about a whole webinar about aging whitetail deer. I think that'd be fun.
me too. It's hard to do.
Nice. Well, we can definitely try to set that up for the next one, Tyler, if y'all are down for that. And then I will, if you just joined the call, because we're going to be wrapping up soon. If anyone has any questions, think of them now before we end this. We do have more of an open meeting. This is the one we do usually every month, every 6 weeks. We do this. It's more of educational hunt lab type material, but we do have the meetups. So those are a little more casual, hunting stories, techniques, things like that. So the next one's Wednesday. If anyone wants to jump on, it's going to be our Western regional director. So Eric, who's in Idaho and Montana. So he hosts a ton of meetups, ton of hunt links, gets people on spring bear, got a guy on a muley this year, got a guy on an elk the year before. Does hunt links every year for big game. Typically the person that goes is the person like, I never thought I'd be able to get out there and do it. So that's always great. But he's going to be on Wednesday. So if y'all want to jump on that, and then I'm going to get these recordings up. So give me a few days or so, 2 weeks max. I should have the Hunt Lab all stocked up with all Tyler's enhancing hunting success webinars. And like we said, he's covered every topic. And you know what, Tyler, I think we did have a deer aging one. So what we'll do is I think so. I'll go back and look. And if so, I'll send you the recording, which is even better because we can just piggyback off that. And then you already kind of have a base and stuff too. I think we did, but let me go back and look. Cause we started doing this like last January. So we've done, this was our 14th or 15th one. So,
well, maybe I'll just kind of piggyback off that a little bit more and I'll get some jaw bones of some of the deer that I've shot over the years and kind of hold them up a little bit to the screen a little bit and kind of just go over like tooth wear, the aging that way. Once you shoot a deer and you look at its teeth and stuff like that, I can talk about some other things too. Viva, not always the antlers are always the indicator, but sometimes they are too for age as well.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'll get that information and send it over to you because when I get it in the Hunt Lab, it'll be organized and I'll be going through to edit them all. So I'll get that up for all y'all that are looking to grow in your whitetail stuff. We even did some trapping and turkey stuff, and there's a few other things in there in the mix too. It is primarily bulky whitetail though, management, public land type things like finding food sources, stuff like that. So I'll stop talking though. Does anybody else have any questions for Tyler? Sweet. Well, if y'all do think of anything, you can reach out to Tyler on the social.
If I'm on Facebook, send me a message. If you really want to chat, I can exchange phone numbers or whatever too and whatnot. I'm always up for helping to educate guys on their habitat management and stuff like that and whatnot. And man, it's so rewarding when you do stuff on the land, you see the wildlife using it, and then you get to harvest an animal off of it. It's one of the most rewarding things.
For sure. For sure. And I love that a lot of your stuff, is for the everyday hunter. It's not just for people that have 2,000 acres of private land. Like this stuff, I remember we did one not too long ago, and you were talking about using hose and lawnmowers and weed eaters and things like that. So you don't, you can do a lot of stuff, by hand. So
I still do stuff by hand. We have a tractor and a no-till drill, and I still do food plots by hand yet.
Sometimes you just got to do it. I do the same thing. I have a garden that I do by hand, that tilling, everything I do old school. And then I have one that we're busting out the tractor. And
Absolutely. Hey, it's more rewarding when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into it without using the big equipment.
It does.
It's really more rewarding that way.
But it's I'll get those up for everybody. Tyler, I really appreciate it. And
absolutely.
Y'all ain't doing anything Wednesday, jump on. I'll talk to Tyler tomorrow, and we'll get this next one set up for y'all.
Yeah, guys, feel free to reach out and say, Tyler, I really want you to talk about this subject. I'm waiting for that. I'm just waiting for the guy to come up and say, hey, I want you to talk about this, 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 and this, because it's going to stretch my mind a little bit more and make me really reach back into everything that I've learned, maybe out the research too a little bit, but I want to be the best I possibly can be for giving you guys the best information I possibly can give you.
And, I talked to people about this before. Obviously, we live in a day and age where you can Google information, you can watch videos, listen to podcasts, TikToks, wherever you get your information. We know how easily accessible it is. But the great thing about this Hunt Lab material is it's from Tyler, who's been with us for a long time. He could even be in here longer than I have been in here. Maybe so.
I think I have.
I think so. Been in here a long time, seen the evolution of Servicide from where we started. And one thing about it is though, having that real life perspective from someone that Tyler's done, he still does in person, in-person webinars on his property and things like that. So that's something we'll get into. Obviously, the United States is huge. So, we can't go everywhere. So we try to make it where it's something where we can go live and people can ask questions and stuff like that. But we'll get some stuff like that rolling. But my point is, you kind of, do you know the person on Facebook? Do you know the person on Instagram? Not knocking them or their information, but I look at years of stuff. And when I've got someone that's been in Servicide for almost a decade, and I've watched them do these practices for over a decade and stuff, it's really hard to not be kind of loyal to that information and try it and then tweak things with your, like I live in Florida, I have to tweak a lot of stuff, but I do a lot of stuff that, I've learned through Tyler and other land management specialists. So feel free to hit Tyler up, y'all. It's an open forum. You can hit him up on the Hunt Lab Hunt Link directory, or you can just go on Facebook group and type in Tyler Heeter, Heeter, and you'll find him.
Yeah, so if nobody has any questions, I think we all know what my next topic is going to be about. So
Dear Agent on the Hoof.
Yep, agent on the hoof. It is a tough thing. We'll dive into that, so we will.
Oh yeah. All right, y'all. Well, I'll catch y'all Wednesday. I'll see you there, and I'll get this recording up tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
You bet.